I died the day they chose me. The Emperor's angels descended on our hive like a storm of gold and ceramite, armor blazing under the harsh industrial lights. They did not speak of glory or honor. They spoke only of duty. No one asked whether we wished to serve. In the Imperium, service is not a choice. It is the only purpose that matters. They took me with 30 other boys from the brutal gang wars of Hive Secundus. My last glimpse of home was through the open hatch of the transport, spires of rusted metal clawing toward a sky none of us had ever seen, acrid smoke that had choked us since birth, the endless drone of machinery that had sung us to sleep on bare steel. None of it was beautiful, but it was mine. It was all I had ever known. It was all I would never see again. The transport ship hummed around us as we sat in silence. No one dared speak. The Space Marine who guarded us made sure of that. His armor was the deep crimson of spilled blood, adorned with symbols of war and devotion. His helmet was a skull-faced mask that betrayed no emotion, no weakness. We had heard of the angels of death only in whispers and propaganda pict feeds, but nothing had prepared us for their sheer physical presence. Every movement he made was deliberate and controlled, as though the universe itself bent to accommodate him. "You are not chosen for greatness," he said at last, his voice amplified and distorted by his helm's Vox grill. "You are raw material, nothing more. Many of you will die. Most of you will fail. This is not a path to glory. It is a sentence of servitude until death claims you." These were not the recruitment words I had imagined. No promise of power, no prestige, only duty and almost certain death. I looked at the others. Some were barely into adolescence, scrawny things with hollow cheeks and eyes far too old for their faces. Others were like me, shaped by years of gang warfare, bodies scarred, minds calloused. The only thing we shared was fear, though none of us would admit it. The journey lasted 7 days, though time meant little inside that metal coffin. We were fed once a day, a tasteless, nutrient gruel that somehow filled our bellies more completely than any underhive meal. Twice daily, we were marched under the dead gaze of servitors, to relieve ourselves. We slept on the metal deck, no blankets, huddling together against the cold. The Space Marine never sat, never removed his helm, never ate. He stood vigil over us, a statue of war given motion. On the 7th day, the ship shuddered. We had arrived. The ramp lowered and blinding light flooded in. After days in dimness, we stumbled out like stunned animals, blinking and disoriented. The world that greeted us was nothing like the hive. Mountains clawed at the heavens, their peaks lost in clouds. Forests of real trees, things we had seen only in flickering picts, stretched across wide valleys. The air was clean, so clean it burned our lungs, poisoned by a lifetime of pollution, and dominating everything. A fortress monastery carved into the face of the greatest mountain, a stone and steel monument to humanity's dominance over nature. "Welcome to your grave," the Space Marine said, removing his helmet at last. The face beneath was barely human. Skin pale as a corpse, crisscrossed with scars, eyes that seemed to look straight through flesh into whatever lay beneath, a mouth set in a permanent scowl. And yet, in those inhuman eyes, there was a flicker of something I could not name. Remembrance, perhaps. Maybe he too had once stood where we stood, a frightened boy wondering if he would ever see his home again. "I am Brother Sergeant Krauss," he said. "From this moment forward, your past lives are erased. Your names are forfeit, your families forgotten. You exist only to serve the chapter, and through it, the God Emperor of mankind." Another Space Marine emerged from the fortress, wearing white robes instead of full armor. His head was shaven, his face a map of surgical scars and augmetics. One eye had been replaced with a glowing red lens that whirred softly as it focused on us. "I am Apothecary Vaughn," he announced. "You will now undergo preliminary examination. Those who pass will begin the process of transformation. Those who fail will serve the Emperor in other ways." The meaning was clear enough. Pass or die. Succeed or be discarded. The Imperium wastes nothing, least of all human life. Those who failed would be repurposed, their minds scraped clean and their bodies bound in crude machinery to serve as servitors, living tools in a vast, uncaring war machine. We were marched through massive adamantium gates into the bowels of the fortress monastery. Corridors wide enough for 3 armored marines to walk abreast stretched before us. Ceiling vaults soared overhead, every surface covered with devotional carvings, skulls, and chapter symbols. Servitors shuffled past, their remaining human eyes barely resting on us. Chapter serfs, thin, gray-clad humans bound to the will of the Space Marines, hurried about their duties, gazes fixed on the floor. The examination chamber was cold and clinical. White tiles covered walls and floor, stained with old blood that no scrubbing could remove. Surgical instruments lined the walls, some recognizable, many not, all threatening. Rows of examination tables waited, each equipped with restraints. "Strip," Apothecary Vaughn ordered. "Completely." We hesitated for a heartbeat. In the underhive, nakedness meant vulnerability, but none of us dared disobey. We shed our filthy clothes, the last tangible pieces of our old lives, and stood shivering in the sterile air. The examinations were thorough and humiliating. Every orifice probed, every limb measured, every joint tested. Blood drawn, skin scraped, reflexes hammered. Vaughn and his assistants spoke over us as if we were livestock, cataloging us with clinical detachment. Subject 17 shows promising bone density. Subject 23 has respiratory scarring consistent with hive pollution. Note for enhanced lung replacement priority. Subject 8 exhibits signs of malnutrition affecting skeletal development. Rejected. And so it went. Numbers, not names. Material, not men. 3 boys were taken away during the examination, deemed unsuitable. Relief warred with shame on their faces. They had failed, but they believed they would live. I never saw them again. When the examinations ended, we were given identical gray robes and led to a dormitory. Rows of narrow cots with thin blankets, nothing more. No decorations, no personal belongings. A single servitor stood at the entrance, its ruined human features half visible beneath grafted machinery. "Sleep," it droned. "Tomorrow you begin to die." I lay on my assigned cot, unsettled by the unfamiliar softness. I had spent my life sleeping on metal and concrete. Around me, boys shifted restlessly. Some wept quietly. Others stared blankly at the ceiling. No one spoke. What could we say? We had been chosen, but for what? To become inhuman warriors in service to a distant, unseen god. To die trying. I thought of my old gang, the Blood Scorpions. We had fought and killed for scraps of territory no sane person would want, over resources barely enough to live on. Yet there had been a kind of brotherhood forged in shared misery. Here, we were not brothers, we were competitors. Only the strongest would ascend. The rest would be discarded, or worse. As sleep finally claimed me, a strange peace settled over my thoughts. I had survived 18 years in the underhive, where most died before 10. I'd killed my first man at 12, a rival who turned his back at the wrong moment. I'd clawed my way to lieutenant in the Blood Scorpions through cunning and controlled violence. If anyone could survive this transformation, I told myself, it would be me. I was wrong, of course. Tororel would not survive. He could not. For a Space Marine is not simply an elevated human. He is something else entirely, both more and less than what humanity might have been. Morning came too soon, announced by a deafening klaxon that ripped us from sleep. We were given 5 minutes to relieve ourselves in communal facilities that offered no privacy, then herded to an enormous dining hall. Space Marines ate at raised tables, consuming vast quantities of food with machine-like efficiency. We aspirants were directed to lower tables where bowls of nutrient porridge awaited. "Eat quickly," the chapter serf said. "You have 10 minutes." The porridge was bland but heavy, designed for function rather than taste. As I ate, I studied the hall. The walls were lined with battle trophies, alien limbs preserved in stasis fields, shattered weapons mounted like relics. High above hung a colossal golden aquila, the two-headed eagle of the Imperium, its wings spreading across the entire ceiling. Before we had finished, Brother Sergeant Krauss strode in. Silence fell instantly among the aspirants. "Today," he announced, "we begin to remake you. Your bodies are weak, your minds are untested. Some of you will not survive the physical conditioning required before implantation. This is by design. Only the worthy will receive the Emperor's gifts." We were taken to a vast training ground, an open courtyard encircled by fortress walls. The morning air was freezing, our breath steamed in front of us. Mountains towered on all sides, their peaks crowned with snow despite the season. "Run," Krauss ordered, pointing to a path that wound up the mountainside. "Those who fail to complete the circuit by midday will not eat today. Those who fail tomorrow will not eat again. Those who fail on the third day will be removed from the program." The path snaked away, disappearing into the tree line halfway up the nearest peak. None of us knew how long it was, but it was obviously many kilometers. We had spent our lives enclosed in the hive. None of us had ever run such distances. Most had never run at all beyond short sprints through cramped corridors. So we ran. At first, the pace seemed manageable, but the constant incline and thinning air quickly broke us down. Within the first kilometer, we were already spreading out, the strongest pushing ahead, the weakest starting to lag. I settled into the middle of the pack. Years of gang life had hardened my body, but the clean mountain air burned my lungs. The path steepened, plunging through dense forests where roots tried to twist our ankles, then out onto rocky ledges where a single misstep meant a fall of hundreds of meters. Servo skulls drifted overhead, monitoring our progress, feeding data back to unseen masters. Time lost meaning. The sun climbed higher, beating down with pitiless light. My robe was soaked in sweat, my feet bled inside ill-fitting boots. Still, I kept running, reducing the world to the rhythm of breath and footfall. This is no different from the Underhive, I told myself. Life there had always been a test of endurance and will. This was just another version of the same struggle. When I finally staggered back into the training ground, the sun was directly overhead. I'd made it by midday. Barely. Of the 27 aspirants who had started the run, only 18 returned in time. The others limped in over the next few hours, faces gaunt with exhaustion and the knowledge that they would not eat. That night, one boy failed to return at all. No one spoke his name. No one asked. He had failed. That was all that mattered here. The next day brought the same run, but now with weighted packs strapped to our backs. The day after that, we ran in primitive carapace armor. Each day the burden increased. Each day more boys did not return. By the end of the first week, only 15 remained. Those who survived grew stronger. The food, the clean air, the constant strain, all of it reshaped us. Muscles thickened, lungs expanded, reactions sharpened. Yet we were reminded constantly this was only preparation. Our bodies were being tempered to endure the true transformation yet to come. In the second week, combat training began. Not with chainswords and bolters, but with wooden staves and bare hands. Brother Sergeant Krauss and other training officers drilled us in the basics of Imperial close combat doctrine. Brutal, efficient, built around overwhelming force and decisive strikes. We fought each other in endless drills and sparring matches. Friendship was forbidden. Compassion was beaten out of us along with weakness. I took a grim pride in my performance. Years of Underhive fighting had taught me how to be vicious and relentless. Even so, the training officers broke us down every day. Their transhuman bodies moved with impossible speed and precision, correcting our technique with blows that left bruises and blood. Every night we collapsed onto our cots, bodies a map of fresh aches, bruises, and scars. Our flesh was being reforged. But it was our minds that concerned the chapter most. In the third week, the hypno-indoctrination began. We were led into dark chambers and strapped into metal thrones. Neural interfaces were clamped to our skulls, sharp connectors piercing skin. Then the visions poured in, bypassing our eyes and ears entirely. The history of the Imperium, the glory of the God Emperor, the treachery of alien, mutant, and heretic. Battle doctrines, weapon schematics, litanies of hatred and devotion. Information thundered into us in an unending torrent that threatened to wash our sense of self away. Hours vanished. We would emerge shaking, minds scrambled, thoughts not entirely our own. Knowledge without understanding is useless, Brother Chaplain Mordith told us in one of his sermons. Understanding without faith is dangerous. You will know, you will understand, you will believe, or you will die. The chaplain was terrifying. His armor was black as the void, his helm a leering skull. His Crozius Arcanum, topped with the Imperial Aquila, crackled with lethal energy. He did not speak of the Emperor's love, only his judgment. Not of glory, but duty. Not victory, but sacrifice. "You think you suffer?" he snarled once as we knelt in the chapel. "You know nothing of suffering. The Emperor sits upon the golden throne, his body a withered husk sustained by the sacrifice of 1,000 souls each day. For 10,000 years he has endured this torment, never resting, never ceasing his vigil. What are your petty pains beside his eternal agony? Nothing. Less than nothing. By the end of the first month, only 10 aspirants remained. We were no longer quite human, but not yet space marines. Our bodies hardened, our minds stuffed with imperial doctrine, our spirits broken and reforged in a constant crucible. We were ready, they said, for the next phase. The true transformation began in the Apothecarium, a vast medical complex buried deep within the fortress. Apothecary Vaughan and his staff moved with the unhurried certainty of those who have repeated the same deadly work for centuries. We were not all operated on at once. Each surgery was carefully scheduled. I was third. I watched as the first 2 aspirants were wheeled away into the theater. Hours later, the first returned, unconscious but alive. His chest had been opened and closed again, the skin puckered around fresh sutures. Cables and monitoring devices tracked the progress of the alien organ now beating inside him. The second did not come back alive. A chapter serf emerged, dragging a body bag, its shape unmistakable. No words of explanation, no rites. He had failed, as so many others had. When my turn came, they stripped me and scrubbed my skin with stinging antiseptics. I was awake as they strapped me to the table. Awake as needles slid into veins, flooding me with drugs that locked my muscles and stole my voice but left my mind clear. Awake as Apothecary Vaughan approached, scalpel in hand, augmented eye humming as it focused on my chest. "The secondary heart," he said clinically. "The first of many gifts, if your body accepts it." The pain defied description. Despite the drugs, I felt every cut, every intrusion into the cage of my ribs, every manipulation of organs to make room for something that had no right to be there. The secondary heart, grown from the chapter's gene seed, was a pale lump of tissue that would, if all went well, become a fully functioning organ, doubling my circulation, feeding the enhanced muscles I did not yet have. Throughout the surgery, Brother Chaplain Mordith's voice echoed somewhere beyond my sight, reciting litanies to steal my soul, or to claim it should I fail. On that table, screaming silently inside my own skull, I began to understand. Becoming a space marine was not an honor. It was a slow, deliberate death of the boy I had been. Maud stood nearby, reciting litanies of strength and endurance. Whether they were meant to comfort me or simply fulfill ritual obligations, I could not tell through the haze of agony. I wanted to scream, but my throat refused to obey. I longed to black out, but even that mercy was denied. When it was finally over, they wheeled me into a recovery chamber where the other surviving aspirant lay. His eyes met mine, and in them I saw the same shock, the same sense of violation. We had been told our bodies would be remade, but only now did we truly understand what that meant. Before we could be rebuilt, we had to be taken apart. Recovery took weeks. The secondary heart slowly integrated with my circulatory system. The pain never truly left. It merely changed, shifting in intensity and location as my body fought against, and then grudgingly accepted, the alien organ. Blood was drawn constantly, analyzed, and used to fine-tune drug regimens. I existed in a twilight world between agony and oblivion. Once the secondary heart was declared stable, the next phase began. The osmodula, a small organ implanted at the base of the skull, started its work on my skeleton. My bones thickened and reinforced, ceramic hard deposits forming within them. The sensation was like growing pains magnified 1,000-fold. I could feel my frame reshaping itself, bones pushing against muscle and skin, tendons pulled taut as my proportions subtly shifted. More organs followed, each surgery another ordeal. The biscopea, placed in the chest cavity, accelerated muscle growth until my flesh strained against my skin. The hemastomen, implanted in the primary heart, altered my blood chemistry, increasing its oxygen-carrying capacity and enhancing clotting and healing. Laraman's organ, nestled beside the main heart, released specialized cells that rushed to seal wounds almost as soon as they formed. Every implantation was followed by weeks of adjustment. Training routines were adapted to test and strengthen each new capability. We grew taller, broader, stronger. Our senses sharpened, our reactions became unnaturally fast. With every change, we stepped further away from ordinary humanity and closer to the transhuman ideal of the Adeptus Astartes. Not everybody accepted the changes. 2 more of our ever-dwindling number died when their systems rejected the catalepsian node. An implant at the back of the brain that allowed a space marine to go without true sleep, resting only half of the brain at a time. Another aspirant was crippled when the implantation of the Priomnor, a pre-stomach that neutralized poisons, went catastrophically wrong. He was taken away, likely to serve the chapter in some lesser role, if he was fortunate, as a chapter serf, if not, as a servitor. Throughout all of this, training continued whenever we were physically able to stand. Physical conditioning grew more punishing as our enhanced physiology developed. Combat drills became more intricate, incorporating real Astartes weapons and equipment scaled down for our still-growing bodies. Hypno-indoctrination intensified, burrowing deeper into chapter-specific doctrines and the minutiae of weapon care and battlefield procedure. We were not merely being trained, we were being programmed. Our thoughts were guided away from personal ambition and funneled into tactical analysis, obedience, and combat efficiency. By the 6th month, only 5 of us remained from the original 30. We had received most of the foundational implants, though the most potent enhancements would only be granted after we proved ourselves as Scout Marines. By any sane measure, we were already transhuman, towering over baseline humans, capable of feats that would have been miraculous in our former lives. Yet to the chapter, we were still only neophytes, unproven. The final test awaited us. A trial by fire that would determine whether we were worthy to don scout armor and take our first steps as true battle brothers. The trial took place on a death world 50 light-years from the chapter's home world. We were transported aboard a small strike cruiser and sealed individually into drop pods. Brother Sergeant Krauss briefed us in the ship's armory as we were fitted with scout armor for the first time, our underskin carapace implants interfacing with its systems. "You will be deployed separately," he explained, checking the seals on my armor's gorget with practiced efficiency. "Each of you has a designated extraction point 50 kilometers from your drop zone. You have 3 days to reach it. The planet's indigenous life forms are universally hostile. Geological surveys indicate valuable mineral deposits that may be of interest to the chapter. You will be equipped with a combat knife, bolt pistol, 3 magazines of ammunition, and a data slate containing minimal navigational data. He paused, his augmented gaze locking onto mine. This is not merely a survival exercise. It is a resource assessment mission. The chapter expects data on the planet's potential usefulness. Failure to provide this information will be counted as mission failure, regardless of whether you reach the extraction point. A space marine bearing the cog-toothed sigil of the Tech Marine Order approached, carrying our weapons. "The Emperor's eyes are upon you," he intoned as he placed a bolt pistol into my hand. Its weight was substantial even with my enhanced strength. Remember, a space marine serves even in death. We were led to our assigned drop pods, each a cramped metal coffin designed to endure the fury of atmospheric entry and deliver its cargo, Astartes or equipment, to the surface with brutal reliability. The interior was bare, a restraint harness, status runes, basic life support systems. Nothing more. When the pod's door sealed shut with a hydraulic hiss, cutting me off from my fellow aspirants, I felt a moment of isolation sharper than anything I had known. In the Underhive, you were never truly alone. The presence of countless lives pressed in on you from every direction. In the Fortress Monastery, the chapter's will and presence were omnipresent. Here, about to be fired at a hostile world inside a falling tomb of metal, was utterly solitary. The drop itself was violence given form. Even with inertial dampeners and my enhanced body, the forces of launch and atmospheric penetration crushed me against the harness. Heat built rapidly as the pod tore through the atmosphere, a sheath of superheated plasma roaring around the hull until the walls themselves seemed ready to glow. Then came the impact, a brutal, bone-jarring crash as the retro thrusters failed to fully cancel our terminal velocity. Absorption gels flooded the compartment in response, encasing me in viscous fluid to prevent catastrophic trauma. For a few moments I hung there, suspended and weightless, my enhanced lungs calmly drawing oxygen from the oxygenated gel. Explosive bolts detonated in a precise sequence. The pod's front section blew outward, the gel draining away. I stepped out onto alien soil for the first time in my life. The world was primordial and savage. Colossal trees loomed overhead, their canopies blotting out most of the light from the system's cold, blue-white star. The air was heavy with humidity and the rich smell of rot, thickly organic in a way the processed hive atmosphere, or even the mountain air of the chapter world, had never been. Alien sounds layered over one another, shrieks, calls, the rustle and snap of unseen things moving through undergrowth. Life everywhere, uncontained and indifferent. I checked my equipment methodically, as trained. Bolt pistol holstered and secure. Combat knife sheathed at my thigh. Data slate functioning and displaying the coordinates of the extraction point. According to its readings, I had been dropped roughly 48 kilometers from my target. I would need to maintain a pace of at least 16 kilometers per standard day to reach it in time. For an unaugmented human, that would have been a serious challenge even on friendly ground. For a space marine neophyte on a death world, it was a deliberate test of everything we had become. The chapter demanded excellence. Anything less was failure. Failure meant death. I began to move, settling into the ground-eating lope our modified musculature and augmented cardiovascular systems allowed. Even with armor and full kit, I could maintain this pace for hours. One of the many gifts the transformation had given me. The first attack came 3 hours into my journey. A predator erupted from the undergrowth. Something like a reptilian wolf, but with too many limbs and too many eyes. It was fast, but I was faster. My enhanced reflexes guided my body before conscious thought caught up. The combat knife punched into its throat as it lunged. Black ichor sprayed from the wound, sizzling where it splashed onto my armor's plates. As per mission parameters, I took samples of its blood and flesh. The data slate's crude cogitator analyzed the specimens, flagging several potentially useful biochemical compounds. All of this would be relayed to the chapter upon extraction to add to their knowledge of the planet. The rest of the day followed a pattern: movement, observation, occasional combat. By nightfall, I had covered nearly 20 kilometers and filled the data slate's memory with biological and geological readings. I chose a defensible position beneath the exposed roots of a massive tree and settled in for a brief rest, allowing half my brain to sleep while the other half remained alert, courtesy of the catalepsan node. Dawn brought new trials. The forest thinned and gave way to a sprawling swamp. Fetid pools bubbled with noxious gases. My armor's auto-senses detected multiple airborne toxins, but my enhanced physiology and multi-lung implant filtered them without difficulty. The ground, however, slowed me. Each step through the sucking mud threatened to wrench my boots free. It was in that reeking marsh that I met the first foe I could not simply kill. A massive, amorphous shape heaved itself from the murk. A gelatinous mass bristling with tentacles and exuding corrosive slime. My bolt pistol roared, mass-reactive shells detonating within its translucent flesh. The creature absorbed the impacts, wounds sealing almost as quickly as they appeared. For the first time since my transformation began, I felt true fear. Not the constant background anxiety of failure, but primal terror in the face of something I could not overpower. In my old life, that fear would have driven me to flee without thought. But the hypno-indoctrination had rewritten those instincts. Fear was no longer a trigger for panic. It was fuel for calculation. I analyzed the situation with unnatural clarity. Direct engagement was futile. My ammunition was limited, and the creature's regenerative capacity clear. Retreat would cost time I could not easily spare and might doom the mission. Observation suggested the creature was highly territorial, but slow-moving outside the water. The solution presented itself with cold simplicity. I skirted the edge of its territory, using my bolt pistol sparingly, not to harm it, but to distract, drawing its attention with shots into the water while I moved in the opposite direction. The maneuver cost me an hour, but preserved my ammunition and prevented injuries that could have jeopardized success. By the second night, I'd covered another 18 kilometers despite the difficult terrain. The swamp gave way to rocky highlands where the air was thinner but cleaner. My augmented vision allowed me to keep moving long after darkness fell, picking careful routes through scree slopes and narrow ravines. I encountered 3 other aspirants during this phase. We exchanged no words. Each of us was focused entirely on his own mission. We acknowledged each other with brief nods and moved on. We were battle brothers in the making, bound by shared transformation and purpose. But this test was personal. Each of us would stand or fall alone. On the 3rd day, I finally caught sight of the extraction point. A plateau cleared of vegetation, marked by a signal beacon visible only to the enhanced spectrum of Astartes autosensors. I had reached the required distance ahead of schedule and gathered extensive survey data. By all rational measures, the mission was already a success. But as I drew closer, I realized the true final trial awaited. The area around the plateau teemed with life signs, predators drawn by the beacon's faint emissions perhaps, or merely congregating around a naturally rich hunting ground. Reaching the extraction point would mean fighting through a gauntlet of the planet's most dangerous creatures. I checked my remaining resources. 2 magazines for the bolt pistol, 12 rounds. My combat knife was nicked and scarred, but still functional. My armor bore multiple scratches and dents, and my left pauldron had a fractured plate, but the suit remained intact. I was exhausted, having allowed myself only the bare minimum of rest needed to retain combat effectiveness. The battle lasted 27 minutes, according to my armor's chronometer. I spent every remaining round and finished the last 3 kills with my knife. One predator tore my left pauldron off in a single swipe, claws shearing through ceramite. Another spat a caustic spray that ate at the seals of my right gauntlet, exposing the skin beneath to the toxic air. My Laraman's cells worked frantically to seal the burns before they could cripple me. When I finally reached the beacon, spattered with human blood and alien ichor, Brother Sergeant Kraus was waiting. He stood motionless, bolter held loosely at his side, giving no sign of whether he had watched my approach. "You are late," he said. I checked my chronometer. I had indeed missed the extraction window by 13 minutes, delayed by the unexpected density of hostiles around the plateau. "The mission data," I replied, offering the data slate instead of excuses. Kraus took it and linked it to his armor. For several long moments he was statuesque, only the faint flicker of his auto senses hinting at activity. "Acceptable," he said at last, returning the slate. "Your tactical assessment of the northern mineral deposits lacks depth." He turned and walked toward the waiting gunship at the center of the plateau, its engines idling. I fell into step beside him, forcing my battered body to match his pace. "How many survived?" The question slipped out before I could crush it, a lingering fragment of human curiosity that indoctrination had not entirely erased. "3," Kraus answered without looking at me. "Including you. The others failed to reach their extraction points in time or failed to gather sufficient mission data. 3 out of 5 who had begun the trial. 3 out of 30 taken from the hive. A 90% attrition rate, and we were still not full space Marines. The cost of creating an Astartes was measured not only in resources, but in lives, in all the potential extinguished so that a handful of warriors might ascend. The return to the chapter world passed in a blur of medical procedures and debriefings. My injuries were treated with the same clinical detachment that had characterized every stage of my transformation. My scout armor was removed, logged, and earmarked for repair or reclamation. The mission data was extracted and pored over by tech marines and apothecaries. Then came the ceremony. The 3 of us who had survived stood before the assembled chapter, or at least those battle brothers not currently fighting elsewhere in the sector. We knelt on the cold stone of the great hall, heads bowed, still wearing the body gloves that interfaced with our armor. The chapter master himself addressed us. His mere presence made even other space marines seem lesser. His armor was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, every plate engraved with the record of battles and honors stretching back centuries. When he removed his helm, his face bore the legacy of countless wars, scarred, rebuilt, and scarred again. Yet there was a grim nobility in his features. "You kneel before us as aspirants," he intoned, his voice filling the vast chamber. "You will rise as scout marines of the chapter. Your transformation is not complete, nor will it be for many years, but you have proven worthy of the next stage of service to the Emperor." He moved to each of us in turn, touching the pommel of a ceremonial power sword to our bowed heads, echoing ancient knighting rites from old Terra. "No longer are you known by the names of your mortal birth," he continued. "You are reborn in service to the chapter and the Imperium. You will be known henceforth by your designation and by the honor you bring to it through dutiful service." When he stood before me, the sword's pommel cold against my scalp, he spoke the words that sealed my transition from gang leader to transhuman weapon. "Rise, Brother Jorel. Not Tiber Jarel of Hive Secundus, lieutenant of the Blood Scorpions. Just Jorel. A designation, not a name. A component in the chapter's war machine rather than an individual with goals beyond service. We were assigned to the 10th Company, the scout company that served as the final proving ground for neophytes before they joined the ranks of full battle brothers. Scout Sergeant Tauron became our new overseer, a veteran of 3 centuries who had chosen to forgo further promotion in order to shape the next generation of Astartes. His face was a landscape of scars. His left eye was replaced by a simple augmetic that glowed a dull red in the dark. "Forget everything you think you know about combat," he told us on our first day of scout training. "You are no longer gangers, or militia, or whatever you were before. You are weapons of the Imperium, and you will learn to kill with the precision and certainty that befits your station." Scout Sergeant Tauron's words marked the beginning of a new phase. Scout training was different from the brutal conditioning that had come before. Previously, we had been broken down. Now, We were being rebuilt, shaped into something with clear and focused purpose. We learned stealth and reconnaissance, how to move unseen despite our enhanced size and weight. We mastered the scout pattern bolter, a lighter variant of the holy weapon wielded by the Astartes. We studied 10 millennia of warfare, campaigns, doctrines, Xenos threats, boarding actions, sieges, absorbing strategies and counter-strategies until they became second nature. Most importantly, we learned to function as a unit rather than as individuals. The three of us who had survived the transformations and earlier trials were joined by 4 more scouts from previous recruitment waves, forming a full squad under Tauron's command. We trained together, fought together, studied together. Individuality was not wholly erased. Tactical flexibility required some measure of independent thought, but it was firmly subordinated to the needs of the squad, the company, and the chapter. My first real combat deployment came 3 months into scout training. A system on the edge of the sector had reported Xenos incursions, orc raiders attacking isolated mining colonies. Our squad was attached to a strike force under Brother Captain Veros, deployed by drop pod against an orc warband that had seized a Promethium refinery. Nothing in the Underhive, and nothing in the training cages, had fully prepared me for war against such a foe. Orcs were nightmare creatures, towering green-skinned brutes as tall as a space marine but broader, their crude weapons powered by some unholy mix of ramshackle technology and latent psychic force. They knew no fear, no restraint, no purpose beyond brutal combat. Violence was their joy. Our drop pod hit the refinery's main courtyard like a meteor, doors detonating outward to clear the kill zone. The full battle brothers went first, tactical marines in blue power armor, advancing with disciplined volleys of bolter fire, cutting down the first ranks of orcs with efficient brutality. Sergeant Tauron led us scouts out behind them, ordering us to take positions atop storage tanks and gantries where our longer-range scout bolters could provide overwatch. The stench hit me first, a suffocating mixture of fungal spore, unwashed bodies, recycled air heavy with industrial chemicals. It seeped through even my enhanced filters. Then came the noise, the bellowed war cries of the orcs, the thud and roar of crude weaponry, the booming replies of our bolters. I took up my assigned firing position and activated my armor's enhanced targeting arrays. Through my scope, individual orcs sprang into sharp focus, twisted faces split by jagged teeth, eyes gleaming with savage delight. I followed my training, prioritizing targets. Heavy weapons first, then leaders bearing crude glyphs of command. My first kill in true battle was an orc Knob. Nearly twice the mass of its kin, plates of scrap metal bolted into rough armor, swinging a massive cleaver capable of slicing through ceramite. I tracked it as it charged toward the flank of a tactical squad, calculating its movement, adjusting for its speed. 3 shots. The first 2 punched through its skull, mass-reactive rounds detonating inside its brain. The third was redundant, but Tauron had drilled one principle into us. Overkill is preferable to leaving an enemy with any chance to rise. The fight raged for hours. The orcs did not break, did not retreat. We cleared the refinery room by room, corridor by corridor, with bolter fire and knives. When the last orc fell, 347 Xenos corpses were counted. 2 full battle brothers lay dead. Their gene seed was recovered by the apothecary for return to the chapter. One of my fellow scouts, Brother Kraus, lost an arm to an orc cleaver and would receive a bionic upon our return. According to Sergeant Tauron, I had performed adequately. No more, no less. I had used ammunition at an acceptable rate, maintained discipline under fire, followed orders without hesitation. In the Underhive, such a battle would have become legend, spoken of for generations. Here, it was merely a skirmish. Another small victory in a war that had raged long before my birth and would continue long after my death. The next 2 years passed in a cycle of training and deployment. We were sent across the sector into war zones of varying intensity, always in support roles, always learning, watching full Astartes at work, participating where ordered. With each mission, we became more efficient, more detached, more Astartes, less human. When our bodies were judged ready, the final implants were added. The progenoid glands, which would one day allow our gene seed to be harvested for future generations, and the black carapace that would bind us fully to our power armor. The day I received my power armor was the day Tiber Joral truly died, if any part of him had remained up to that point. I stood in the chapter's armory as artificers and tech marines performed the sacred rituals of armoring. Each component was anointed with blessed oils and censed with incense before being attached to my body. The process was slow, reverent. Plates were locked into place with ritualistic precision, each connection to the black carapace checked and rechecked. At the end, they placed the helmet in my hands. For a moment, I simply stared into the empty eye lenses, seeing my reflection warped in the dark glass. The face that looked back was no longer one I recognized. My features had been subtly altered by bone growth and enhanced healing, too symmetrical, too precise. My eyes had shifted from the muddy brown of my birth to a piercing amber, a side effect of the ocular implants. My skin was pale, rarely touched now by natural light. I donned the helmet. The seals engaged with a soft hiss. The auto-sense came online and the world changed, every sound filtered, every sight annotated with targeting data, range information, atmospheric readings, squad status runes. Reality became simultaneously more detailed and more abstract. "Brother Jorel," the master of the armory said, his voice perfectly clear in my vox. "You now bear the full panoply of war granted to the Adeptus Astartes. Treat it as an extension of your own flesh, for that is what it is. Maintain it as you would your bolter or blade. Honor it as you would the chapter's banner. It embodies 10,000 years of warfare in the Emperor's name." I flexed my gauntleted fingers, feeling the armor respond as though it were my own skin. The suit multiplied my strength many times over, yet it moved with surprising fluidity. Walking in it was like wearing a personal tank shaped roughly like a man. "Your final trial awaits," the armory master said. "May the Emperor guide your bolter." That trial was simpler and far more profound than any that had preceded it. We were taken deep into the fortress monastery, into a chamber called the Hall of Truth. Only the chapter's senior officers and the chaplain attended. There, we would face the last test of our transformation and indoctrination. The Hall of Truth was circular, its walls lined with statues of the chapter's heroes, reaching back to its founding. The floor was inscribed with ancient script, passages from the Codex Astartes and the chapter's own battle litanies. In the center stood a lone pedestal bearing a single object, a bolt pistol of archaic design, its metal worn smooth by countless hands. Chapter Master Vanax presided, flanked by Brother Chaplain Mordath and Brother Apothecary Van, the same trinity that had overseen our transformation from the beginning. Around them stood company captains and senior officers, their armor heavy with the icons of centuries of warfare. "Step forward, Brother Jorel," Vanax commanded. I advanced to the center of the chamber, my armor quietly flagging faint energy signatures in the floor and walls, hidden technologies woven into the ancient stone. "Remove your helm," Mordath ordered. I released the seals and lifted the helmet away. The air was cold and dry, thick with incense and the faint ozone of active machinery. "You stand before your chapter as one remade," Vanax said. "Your body reforged, your mind indoctrinated, your spirit tempered. Yet one question remains. One truth must be faced before you take your place among the battle brothers." Apothecary Van stepped forward, holding a data slate. "According to our records, you were born in Hive Secundus, Segmentum Pacificus," he said. "You rose to prominence in a gang known as the Blood Scorpions, attaining the rank of lieutenant through acts of violence and cunning. Your gang controlled 3 sectors of the Underhive, primarily engaged in protection rackets and the distribution of Obscura, a proscribed narcotic." He looked up from the slate, fixing me with one human eye and one augmetic. Your final act before recruitment was the assassination of a rival gang leader, an individual known as Vex, who attempted to encroach upon Blood Scorpion territory. You killed him and 6 of his bodyguards using poisoned blades and improvised explosives. Is this account accurate? It is, I said. My voice sounded too deep, too resonant to belong to the ganger being described. Chaplain Mordath stepped forward next, his skull helm set aside for the ceremony. What remained of his face was heavily augmented, more machine than flesh. Before you is a bolt pistol, he said. It is loaded with a single round. Behind you stands Brother Thaddeus, who completed his final trial 3 months ago. I had not been aware of another presence in the chamber. With my helmet removed, my auto senses had been disabled. I did not turn. Protocol demanded my attention remain fixed ahead. The final truth is this, Mordath continued. Your transformation is not merely physical. It is not only new organs and conditioned reflexes. It is a fundamental rewriting of what you are. A rebirth into a purpose your former self could never have understood. To complete this transformation, you must sever the last remaining tie to your past. Vanax's voice rolled through the hall like distant thunder. Take up the bolt pistol, Brother Jarrell. Turn and face Brother Thaddeus. One of you will leave this chamber as a full battle brother of the chapter. The other will have given his final service. Realization struck with cold clarity. The Hall of Truth was not just ceremonial. It was an execution ground, a final and irrevocable test of obedience and indoctrination. I was being ordered to kill, or be killed by, another neophyte who had passed every prior test. I picked up the bolt pistol, feeling the weight of its history as much as its metal. Then I turned. Brother Thaddeus stood 5 meters away, armored as I was, helm removed. His face was unfamiliar, likely from a different intake. His expression was calm, accepting. He carried no weapon. A surge of thoughts flashed through my mind. I could refuse the order, prove that some shard of human morality remained. I could deliberately miss, though the attempt would be obvious. I could turn the gun on myself, denying them this final step in hollowing out my humanity. But those were the thoughts of Tiber Jorel. I was no longer Tiber Jorel. I was Brother Jarrell, Space Marine neophyte, conditioned to obey, engineered to place the chapter's will above all. I raised the bolt pistol, aligned the iron sights with Thaddeus's forehead, and pulled the trigger. The report echoed through the chamber like a thunderclap. For a moment, Thaddeus remained upright, a neat hole in his brow. Then he collapsed, his armored bulk crashing against the stone floor. I lowered the pistol and turned back to face the chapter master. Waiting. Vanax nodded once, a small acknowledgement. The flesh is weak, he intoned, but the spirit endures. You have severed your connection to humanity, Brother Jorel. You are now truly Astartes. Apothecary Van moved to Thaddeus's corpse, already preparing to harvest the progenoid glands that would one day become new gene seed. Nothing was wasted. Even in death, a space marine served. There is one detail that may interest you, Brother Jorel, Chaplain Mordath added, his augmetic eyes gleaming. Brother Thaddeus was born Vex Garnon of Hive Secundus, the rival gang leader whose assassination was your final act as a mortal. He smiled faintly, if such an expression could be called a smile. The Emperor's design moves in ways beyond our comprehension, does it not? The revelation should have shocked me. The man I had just executed had been my sworn enemy in my previous life, a man I had already tried to kill once before. We had both been taken from the same hive, both survived the agonies of transformation, only for one to kill the other in this last test. I felt nothing, no satisfaction, no regret, no sense of grim poetic justice. Those emotions belonged to Tiber Jorel, and he was gone. Only the weapon remained. Return to the armory, Vanax ordered. Complete the rites of armament. You will be assigned to the 5th Company under Captain Helios. The orcs of Wa Grimskar have invaded the Thaxos system. We deploy at dawn. So I did. I returned to the armory. My armor was blessed and properly consecrated now that I had proven worthy of it. I was issued a bolter, a combat knife, and the remaining accoutrements of a tactical marine. I took my place in Squad Tarentus of the 5th Company, a single component in the chapter's war machine. That evening, as I performed the prescribed maintenance rites on my weapon and armor, Brother Sergeant Tarentus approached me in the barracks. "The first deployment is the hardest," he said without preamble. "Not because of the fighting, because it is the first time you truly understand what you have become." I did not look up from my work. "I understand my purpose, Brother Sergeant." "No," he replied, voice heavy with centuries of experience. "You understand your function. Purpose comes later, if it comes at all. Function is what you do. Purpose is why you do it." He sat beside me, his own armor already prepared. "When I was newly raised to the battle companies, like you, I found myself questioning, not our orders, not our doctrines, but the deeper meaning of our existence. We are created to fight and die for an Imperium that rarely acknowledges our sacrifice, to protect humans who fear us as much as they revere us. We are weapons, yes, but weapons wielded to what end?" The words skirted dangerous territory, close to the line of heresy. Yet Tarentus was a veteran of 2 centuries of war. His loyalty was beyond doubt. "I found my answer in an unexpected place," he continued. "During a compliance action on a hive world much like the one you came from, we were sent to crush a worker uprising. A simple task beneath us, but the PDF had failed and the governor had called upon the chapter." His gaze seemed to drift through the wall, focused on memory. "We were clearing a hab block when I entered a dwelling and found a family hiding there. Parents and 3 children, terrified of both the rebels and us, terrified of the Emperor's angels sent to save them. The father stood in front of his family, arms spread, as if he could shield them from a bolt round with his own body. There was no defiance in him, only fear, and a kind of desperate courage born of love." Tarentus turned back to me. In that moment, I understood, not with my indoctrinated mind, but in my gut, that this man, weak and mortal and utterly insignificant in the grand machinery of the Imperium, possessed a kind of bravery we can never truly know. He was what we protect. Not the Imperium as an abstract idea, not the distant Emperor on his golden throne, but humanity in all its fragile, irrational glory. He rose. "You executed Brother Thaddeus today without hesitation, as required. You are a weapon perfectly crafted for war. But never forget that weapons require a wielder, and that true purpose lies not in the killing blow, but in what that blow defends." He left me alone with my bolter, my armor, and my thoughts. His words settled into my mind alongside the hypno-indoctrination and battle doctrines that formed the framework of my thinking. We deployed to Thaxos III at dawn, as promised. We boarded the strike cruiser, vigilant faith in flawless formation, each squad moving like a single organism. The warp journey would take 17 days, time enough to drill, to pray, to prepare. In my meditation cell, kneeling before the small shrine to the Emperor that every space marine maintained, I turned Tarentus's words over in my mind. Purpose beyond function was hard to grasp within a remade psyche conditioned for obedience. I had been created to follow orders, to kill the enemies of the Imperium, to serve until death. What could exist beyond that? Yet some faint echo of Tiber Joral, a shadow of the man I had been, reached toward the idea. I remembered the underhive, the exhausting struggle for survival that consumed every day. I remembered the blood scorpions, the brutal camaraderie of the gang. I remembered my mother, her face blurred now by time and indoctrination, dying of a curable illness because medicine was a luxury the underclasses could not afford. Those memories felt like relics seen through armored glass. I could observe them, but not truly feel them. Still, they contained something my current existence lacked, a quality that refused to fit neatly into Astartes' logic. I finished my devotions and rose, pushing aside these reflections as irrelevant to my assigned role. Thaxos III awaited. There would be orcs to kill, objectives to capture, orders to execute. Questions of purpose could be delayed, indefinitely, if necessary. Later, as I prepared for the first training cycle aboard the ship, my enhanced hearing caught a hushed conversation between two chapter serfs nearby. They were checking equipment, unaware that a space marine could hear them at such a distance. "Another batch of new ones," one said. "Faces like stone, all of them. Remember when we were taken from Hive Primus? We thought they'd be our saviors, taking us to the stars." "They are what they need to be," the other answered. "The Emperor's finest, his angels of death. Without them, the Imperium would have fallen long ago." "I know," the first replied softly. "But sometimes I wonder what they gave up to become that. Not just their bodies. What's inside? The human part." "Careful," the second muttered quickly. "Dangerous thoughts. Best focus on your duties. The angels hear more than you think." They moved on, their discussion turning to mundane details of cargo and rights. But their words remained with me. What had I sacrificed? Certainly everything that had made Tiber Jural a person. My past, my bonds, my capacity for certain kinds of feeling. But would any of that have led anywhere but an unremarked death in the Underhive? Forgotten within weeks? Was being a weapon in the Emperor's arsenal truly a loss? Or was it an elevation from meaninglessness? The thought of purpose circled in my mind like some unseen predator, testing the limits of my conditioning. I forced it away and focused on combat drills. If I survived, I would have decades, perhaps centuries, to wrestle with such questions. For now, there were orcs to kill, ground to secure, a sector to protect. As vigilant faith translated into the warp, its Geller field flaring against the madness outside, I joined my squad for tactical briefings. The purity of battle, the simplicity of mission parameters and enemy silhouettes would scour these unwanted reflections from my mind. I was Brother Jorel, tactical marine of the 5th Company, a weapon of the Imperium, forged from human stock, but reforged into something beyond human. If a ghost of Tiber Jural still lingered somewhere deep within the armor and gene-crafted flesh, it would fade beneath the weight of centuries of war. That was not a tragedy. It was simply the cost of becoming one of the Emperor's angels of death. The boy had died so that the weapon could live. And in the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, weapons are the only currency that matters.